And it just goes on and on and on. For a whopping conservative total of 262 million. Governments winning the war against humanity. And let me just be clear. That's governments killing unarmed civilians. That doesn't even count military casualties. If you add those in, it's well over 350 million. So democide, or death by government, is the #1 threat because it's already been carried out many, many times, and governments all over the world are engaging in mass murder right now, and our own government, under the National Defense Authorization Act, is openly stating that they will kill U.S. citizens, secretly arrest U.S. citizens, and have us disappear into secret prisons and black holes. So the gauntlet has been thrown down in front of us. You've seen how governments have overtly killed their populations. By the sword, by the gun, by starvation. But what about covert forms of genocide? We're now going to look at that area. And then I'll get into the mad scientist activity of the global rulers who are trying to basically become God. Throughout history, there have been two major movements. Those that are promoting and pushing for human liberty and for empowering humanity, and those that seek to dominate and control it. Now, a pseudoscience developed around 1850 in the United Kingdom called eugenics. And a spin-off of that, of course, was the Nazis and their race purification program. But eugenics was funded by the British royal family and was basically just a regurgitation of what royalty had already believed for thousands of years, that they were divine, that they had a divine right of kings, and that they had a right to enslave, dominate, and kill populations. Now, as liberty grew worldwide, governments began to develop covert means to control populations and to exterminate them. And that's what many famous eugenicists, including Nobel Prize winners, have written about and talked about, like Bertrand Russell. Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Bertrand Russell. You can go back to the 1920s and 30s, and they obsess on putting chemicals in our food, in our water, to make us less aggressive, more docile, to dumb us down so we will submit. What's so frustrating about these covert programs at population reduction is that they're not really covert. Sure, it's not on the nightly news, but it's all hidden in plain view. You know about the experimentation on black men, injecting them with syphilis, and Tuskegee experiment, and plague bomb test off the coast of Scotland, and all of England being sprayed with biologicals. Or Henry Kissinger in the 1970s putting out U.S. policy, State Department Memorandum 200, that called for using food and war as a weapon to reduce populations in the third world. It is so diabolical. This corporatist world government is built and based on reducing population. And it's in the British Population Commission documents of 1949. White House science czar John P. Holdren wrote in the 1970s that they should develop covert chemicals in the water to reduce fertility and the population. It's amazing. They admit that they're establishing a global corporate government to carry out genocide covertly through vaccines, through sodium fluoride, through sterilants like bisphenol A, aspartame. The list goes on and on. It is all meant to poison and debilitate and reduce our fertility. That's why cancer rates have skyrocketed. That's why the United States has the highest rate of cancer, diabetes, neurological disorders. It's all being beta tested here. World government is being established as a straitjacket on the planet so the globalists can carry out genocide. And it's not fair to call them Nazis. The Nazis just moved too quickly and were exposed. It's not fair to call them Nazis because they're worse than Nazis. They are the progenitors of the Nazi idea. But they're patient, they're calm, they pose as philanthropists, but they can't control themselves sometimes. That's why Bill Gates, whose father was the head of Planned Parenthood and a known eugenicist, has admitted he wants to reduce population. And that's what his foundation is really all about. He's bragged about get rid of a grandma and hire 10 teachers.
Is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
He's come out and said, give people vaccines to reduce population.
So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
It is so incredibly disgusting. And he's now the #1 funder of GMO crops being developed across the world. And in every study that's been done of GMO crops across the board, they massively reduce fertility in the first generation of rats and guinea pigs and other rodents like rabbits. And within 3 generations, near total sterility and bizarre deformities, shriveled sexual organs, hair growing in the mouth. It is beyond bizarre.
Those that ate the genetically engineered soy, they didn't actually show the problems in the first generation. The second generation was slower growth, slower onset for maturity, but by the third generation, that's when the boom hit. And that was when nearly all of the adults had lost the ability to have babies.
And then we look at Monsanto, that Bill Gates is the major owner of, the same folks that gave us Agent Orange and you name it. And we learn that in their own cafeteria, in their own restaurants and cantinas, there is no GMO. And then we learn Bill Gates and the Rockefeller Foundation are building underground seed vaults of uninfected non-GMO seeds all over the world at the Arctic Circle and other areas. They are obsessed with giant farms that produce all the food they eat. The cattle are only fed organics. That is then shipped around the world, no matter where they go. Their own private chefs prepare their food. But it gets worse. Monsanto, who's gotten their people in all the regulatory positions, is coming out with new federal regs that you can't even be told when you're being fed GMO, that's designed to sterilize you and basically give you organ failure and cancer. So they won't eat it in their own Monsanto restaurants at their facilities. And Bill Gates won't eat it. And the Queen of England, who's a known eugenicist, won't eat it. And Prince Philip, who says he wants 80% of you dead, he won't eat it. If I were reincarnated, I would wish to be returned to this earth as a killer virus to lower human population levels. Prince Philip. The Queen of England is obsessed with organic raw milk. But in the United States and Canada and England, they're persecuting Amish and others that are producing it and selling it to their neighbors. And the communist Chinese leadership, who publicly signed on to a eugenics program with the globalists to reduce their population in exchange for development, their inner party chiefs are obsessed on record with nothing but pure organic food while they force GMO on their population. It is all about sterilizing the population and giving them cancer. And the graphs and the numbers don't lie. They are building Trojan horse fertility reduction, sterilants, and cancer trigger systems into all of the GMO and carrying out a covert genocide program. There are so many other examples of the elite poisoning us while doing everything they can to avoid their own garbage. But I'll give you just one more example here, and that's Germany. And of course, this is going on all over the world. It came out a few years ago that the German government and the top military brass were refusing to take the H1N1 shot. So Big Pharma produced a, quote, clean or safe vaccine for them. And of course, it did come out that the H1N1 vaccines did have other RNA added to it and other viruses. And basically, was just a Trojan horse for population reduction. And there have now been many other vaccine trials that have come out where they're actually killing homeless people in the test and even newborn children. I saw reports a decade ago where the CDC had a secret meeting and Congress demanded the documents. That's why we now have them. And the leadership of the CDC was saying, tell your families don't take the vaccines. It's causing brain damage, but don't tell the public. They learned when Hitler had guys in black uniforms out there shooting people in pits, that was a little too obvious. Now they just soft kill you. And then you go to one of these big Rockefeller-controlled hospitals, and they suck all your savings out of you. And the globalists have even told us, diet, injections, and injunctions will bring us under the heel of the globalist. Our species is incredible. We're dynamic creatures that created space travel and classical music and literature and poetry and film. And these globalist psycho dirtbags now control the media and teach us how bad children are, how pathetic we are, how we're scum, how we have no heroes, how there's no good guys. So we'll just roll over and give the world to them. It's truly disgusting. The ultimate power trip by Ted Turner, Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, people like George Soros, Oprah Winfrey, meeting in secret in New York to talk about ways to forcibly reduce population. And then when the article did leak out, they tried to have it suppressed.
That much money, that much power around one table. It begs the question, what were they doing? What were they scheming? Total world domination?
This group, together for 6 hours, was talking about charity, education, emergency relief, global health.
The very people that talk about how they want to kill us all day run the global programs to make sure our kids get extra vaccines and eat GMO. It doesn't get any more obvious. This isn't 2 + 2 = 4. This is 1 + 1 = 2. This is so ridiculously obvious. It was the eugenicist, population reductionist Adolf Hitler who said, the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it. And when I first read that as a teenager, I didn't understand it. But as I've learned more, I realize how true that is. Once you tell a giant lie from a position of authority, like David Rockefeller or Ted Turner or Bill Gates, and once the politicians and the general public go along with your lie, they've now all signed on to it, and they give power to the lie.
Is there a connection with autism, for example?
Well, Dr. Wakefield has been shown used absolutely fraudulent data. He had a financial interest in some lawsuits. He created a fake paper. The journal allowed it to run. All the other studies were done, showed no connection whatsoever, again and again and again. And so it's an absolute lie that has killed thousands of kids.
And it's then very hard to reverse that lie because it's got so much momentum and such a great weight, because the public is taught that if they ever stand up to the lie, it'll bring down the whole house of cards. My friends, we need to bring down this house of cards. If it doesn't come down, we're ruined. Most of us are already walking dead. We were born being fed deadly fluoride. We had our IQs reduced. We were shot up with dangerous vaccines. We've been fed GMO. It's almost impossible to stay away from it unless you're some billionaire who has their own private farms and ranches and private chefs that fly around behind you, preparing your meals. The only way to defeat these people is to realize it is a big lie. It is a giant hoax, and to read their own arrogant statements. If a Black Death could be spread throughout the world, once in every generation, survivors could procreate freely without making the world too full. Bertrand Russell. Talk about sick control freaks who hate humanity so much that they spend their every waking minute trying to think of ways to set up a global government so they can exterminate us and our families. My God. And their plan is so horrific, they think we're too weak-minded to face what they've admittedly been caught doing and to resist them. Are you pathetic scum that deserves to die? Are you going to prove them right? It's up to you. The globalists have been so arrogant that they've not even hidden any of their designs. They think that it's so horrific that we'll just let them get away with what they're doing. Are we smart enough to learn from history? Government is the #1